Welcome one and all throughout time and space for this episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. This episode, we will cover the second week of October 2022 the news of October 2nd, 2022. I don't know how we would actually cover a week. Okay, onwards to the rest of the intro, after which we will give our thoughts on whether to resurrect or rebury the 2012 anime franchise Girls und Panzer. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a full-time weeb. I'm sorry. I wish I was a full-time weeb. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic. And with me, as always, is my co-host Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time Daikoku Kansera. Now, Jay, oh my goodness, finally got through all of that. Crunchyroll had dropped a video basically celebrating the 10-year anniversary for the anime of topic, Girls und Panzer. Who'd have think? And this is a little bit of a late entry to the news, as Jay can attest. This literally dropped the day before that we're recording. And with this show, it's mainly just like walking through like the last decade and how Girls und Panzer has sort of affected like the anime community. Basically, just showing or showcasing the actors, how they're sort of going on tour, and some of their appearances were actually like raves. So I don't know if the actresses were treated like pop idols or not. Because as I'm looking like through at this video, like there's a scene where people are using nightsticks or like the little glow sticks and things like that, and it seems to be very much like a pop idol sensation thing. And Jay, what were your thoughts on Crunchyroll dropping a 10-year anniversary video?
It makes sense for how big the property is, and it's something that's kind of gone overlooked because most of the merchandise and the materials for Girls und Panzer or G-Up, which is also known as, is that it's all in like light novels.
G-Up.
Yes. Yeah, light novels, video games, and mangas, because I can talk more about it later, but there's 17 mangas.
What?
Girls und Panzers, and like break off side stories and other battalions that they talk about in the series, and it's like just giant, massive world that no one talks about. You have to be really deep in the closet fan of military anime to know about all this. But yeah, it makes sense because there's a big market apparently, and Crunchyroll is very good for tapping into what people like. So not surprised at all.
Very nice, very nice. So now that we've mentioned a little bit about that, as I said, we are transitioning from the news, and we are now here to talk about our anime of choice, G-Up. Or I want to start using that now. That's really good. Or G-Up. Nah, G-Up sounds better. So now we will be talking about G-Up. And Jay, what are your thoughts about G-Up? What was your first exposure to it? Was this your first time watching it? Where else have you heard about this anime?
All right. Yeah. So this is my choice. And I'll definitely get into it, but just to mention with our YouTube audiences that Timecodes are going to be in the description and in the doobly-doo below. But yes, this is a short version of our podcast in full. You can get it on our audio platforms as in iTunes, Spotify, and where else are we, Sam? I forget.
iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. Get good, you nerds. Help us out. Help out the culture.
Exactly, yeah. So that's full discussion of the weekly news. But now, yes, let me talk about G-Up, because this is an anime that I actually made the mistake of thinking it was another anime. So,
what other anime did you think? I'm sorry,
I thought that this was Girls' Last Tour, because Girls' Last Tour is somewhat of a similar premise of girls in military.
Oh yeah, they're also in a tank. Yeah,
in a tank as well. Yeah, they're in the Panzer, which they talk about enough to give you like a history lessons about the World War II tanks. But yeah, I was like, oh, finally, I can finally watch this anime. So I was surprised when I saw the PV for this, and I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was at all. And then my second thought was, oh no, I hope Sam doesn't hate me because I put Sound of the Sky as my favorite anime from 2010, and that's girls doing cute things, but with military kind of thing. And I was like, oh no, this is that, but also tanks. So when when I made that realization, I was like, oh, I know, I hope Sam doesn't hate me. But very surprisingly, this does do a lot in the moe genre of girls doing cute things, but it does steer away from the title of being like a slice of life, which Sound of the Sky is more slice of life. It panders to like a female audience while also being like kind of smooths over all the rough edges of the military as well, kind of giving an unrealistic portrayal of military life. And I was like, oh, I hope that's not this. But very much surprisingly, it's not that. So this is based off a manga series that ran from 2012 to 2014. So the anime and the manga were coming out at the same time. So it's somewhat of a anime original property by Studio XAS, and XAS is another very particular studio because in all of the decade of 2010s, they only did 4 animes. And we did talk about XAS before because a couple of months ago, we talked about an anime getting its adaptation called Hero Classroom, which I think was one of your news stories. But yeah, the only thing that really known for outside of GirlsundPanzer is Regalia, which was a mech in 2016. That is kind of the another standout from the 2010s, as mech was very sparse in that decade. But yeah, as I said earlier, there are 17 other mangas after the original 4-volume original series. There's 3 light novels, there's 4 games, as well as 3 movies and 2 OVAs. So I think Crunchyroll knows what they're doing when they're celebrating its 10-year anniversary. It's like, oh yeah, check out all the other stuff, buy all the other stuff, absorb, consume all the other stuff. But speaking about the anime, it premiered back on October 9th, 2012, so we're just around the 10-year anniversary. So it originally had 12 episodes with 2 recap episodes, and it's available on High Dive. Rating is TV 14, and it's in the genre of military, comedy, and sports. So before I get to the premise, Sam, how does this compare to Sound of the Sky for you? Let's start there.
I would say, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm low key glad that it's not necessarily like I'm glad it's not Girls on Last Tour, because in Girls on Last Tour it seemed more slice of life, like Sound of the Sky was, and as you mentioned before, with the themes or this genre, this really does feel like a sports, because the main characters in this series, they are in this club called Tankery, where it's like airsoft but like in tanks, and they're actual competitions. So it feels very much like robotic notes in a way, right? Because they are actively competing. They're trying to upgrade their tanks. They're trying to maintain their tanks. They're trying to learn teamwork, things like that. So it feels like there is a direction rather than just like, oh, I'll just meander throughout town, maybe in this tank, maybe find some food. And, like that story has its place elsewhere. But I do prefer this setting a little bit more.
Okay, I'm glad, because I was like, after watching the 3 episodes, I was like, oh, this is a tournament shonen arc. Because, yeah, let me go through the premise, because it's a very interesting take on something that feels very anti-Japanese in a way. So in this very fictional world, it's a sport that turns basically the art of tank combat, or as you said, Sam, tankery, into basically this cultural, social practice by girls or young girls for the status of like elegance. It's kind of in the same vein as like tea ceremonies, like part of Japanese culture. But essentially it's called Senshido, where it also fills into this role of as a martial arts as well. They use the word martial arts as well because the main character's family is like a practitioner of this combat form, and she kind of is traumatized by her family because they have this like very high status and elite status, and they kind of think of her as like the black sheep of the family. So she transfers to a new school where there's no practice of tankery going on, but then the student council, being all powerful, pressure hers and force hers into creating a tankery club. And that's the base premise of it. And it's very shonen with like the first 3 episodes where it's get the team together, show off personalities. Oh no, there's a tournament coming up. So it's really interesting that even off the bat of the first 3 episodes, I was like, okay, one, it was scheduled for 12 episodes, so it's a very controlled layout of pacing and structure to the story, as well as it only has 4 volumes, which is like the perfect amount for a 12-episode series, so it covers the whole run of the manga, or the original manga as well. So it's tightly controlled with its characters and the pacing. So the first 3 episodes are like very standard. Like they introduce Miho, the main character girl, with her new friends of what are their names?
Right here, it's Yukari, Mako, Hana, and Saori.
Right, so the 5 main positions in a tank is the commander, the gunner, the loader, the radio operator, and the driver. So all girls have a different role. And yeah, like you said something very funny about it kind of placating to like airsoft somewhat. But also in the first episode, one of the girls gets knocked out because of the artillery that they're using is real. So it's like...
So, like, I have thoughts on that.
Okay, so yeah, that's why I wanted to, like, poke the first hole in this nice balloon about the suspension of disbelief, because they are using live rounds inside this mock battle, but also they're not acting like live rounds as well. So is that something you caught on to, Sam?
Oh my, it's just, it's crazy, right? Because, like, it's the premise. It's very like they're like, oh, cutesy stuff like that, and like when they're starting the club, right? It's like we don't have any tanks but this one, and it's like, okay, but we need more tanks, and you see the club members. There's like 50 of, well, not 50, maybe 20, and they are like, okay, go find your own tanks. It's like, what are you talking about? It's like, we used to have tanks here at the school. They're around here somewhere. Go out and find them. It's like, okay. Like one group found a tank at the bottom of a lake. Another group just like found it in the forest, because at this school they just leave their tanks around with their live ammunition, right? And then they bring it back to the hangar where it's at, and they clean up the tanks, and it's all done within like that same day or afternoon. And these are tanks that haven't been used for over, I think they said 10 years or something else like that. Like, there's obviously rust, there's a lot of work and detail that they have to do to these tanks, and they are able to refurbish these tanks in an afternoon. Like they were able to find them, move them from the places that they found them at, again, one of them being at the bottom of the lake, and then they were able to refurbish them all in the same day. And they don't like it. I feel like with this one is like they do enough with real world stuff, and like with everything else they sort of just like leave it in the air. So like with Miho, like they do have her drop some actual knowledge, because as you said, her and her family, they've dealt with tankery stuff before. So the girls are like, oh no, what do we have to do? And Miho's like, oh, we have to do X, Y, and Z. And so they go do X, Y, and Z, no problem. But again, they don't really talk about like the logistics of, having to change out the tread, or having to dig out a tank from a mud pit that they were locked in, or having to check the engines to make sure they work, thinking about fuel, right? And just going back to the live ammunitions, like safety. I mean, I would say like the closest thing that you could probably do, like with that tank, like try to be safe, right? You maybe can do, say, rubberized ammunition so that people don't get hurt, but you can still get hurt that way. The closest thing that I think that you could probably do is like maybe just use blanks and sort of laser tag type stuff, because there was a place near me that was called Tank America. They're not open anymore because they ended up closing during the pandemic. But one thing that was kind of cool about them was they used real weapons, but they had retrofit the weapons to where the magazines were CO2 cartridges. So you have the weights, and you have to load up the weapon with an actual magazine. But when you shot, you got kickback, but because it's CO2, like they're just pushing out air. But the gun is also fit to be sort of like a laser tag gun. So you can hit somebody with a laser, but you will still feel the kickback, and you'll still feel the weight of the weapon. So you can probably do something like that with their tanks, and you don't really have to worry about safety. But then again, like they're using live ammunitions, and like they're running through the streets of their city like it's okay. I mean, there was one time when they were on a bridge, and they were being they were in a pincer attack with some other classmates, and I'm just sitting there thinking, it's like, you have live ammunition. How are you not going to kill them on the bridge, right? And I was that, and like they also show like how, I guess, like you win. I guess it's just assumed, like once you hit them hit them with a shell, and so many people are knocked out, you would just hit the flag. Or I don't know if, like, if you hit them in a certain spot, like the surrender flag would pop up automatically. They never really explain that. It's just shown like, oh, if they're hit, a flag would pop up. It's kind of weird. Like they pick and choose what to focus on and what's necessary. And I felt like I've ranted a little bit too hard on some of the real world stuff that I've sort of had problems with. But it was really cool to watch it, because as I'm watching it, I'm like, this has Valkyria Chronicles vibes. And like it's like I just really love it. Like because very similar to GirlsundPanzer, like you only have so many people in this tank, and you have to be able to move it and maneuver it. It was very, very fun. And like with that, like it's an actual wartime setting. So like when they use live ammunition, it's like, okay, cool. It's like I'm trying to unalive this person in a cutesy way. But like with these like then again, like that was my thoughts on the girls using live ammunition. I mean, what did you think about that and how they handled it?
Oh well, you said everything basically. It is a very small moment because it is a very it takes up the later half of the second episode and then the starting of the third episode. But again, it's
Mm-hmm.
a very small nuanced thing that can't really be covered in a 14 or a 12 episode, like, because it's not shop talk centric. It's more of a battle
I would
I guess
say
a
like
battle
that.
shonen,
Yeah.
essentially, where they're glossing over like the real world implications, but the real world implications of it is more about what is the cultural impact of girls getting into military service. Because in America, we have like ROTC, which is a military
Yeah.
service, and even with some of the training that recruits can do, even as not volunteers, yeah, volunteers in the military, they do have live round exercise, but this is kind of just focused on that portion of it. So it's very interesting that they don't go into the shop talk direction. They go into more of the glossing over direction from a narrative standpoint, because each of the girls have like their own kind of past history with this culture as well. Because like
Mm-hmm.
Hana has her family's like as like florists, or I forgot what the traditional Japanese art is, where you decorate using flowers and like floral patterns. But
Oh, yeah, yeah. I forgot
she has an
what you
interest
put it.
in tankery because that's her passion. And then there's like a fanatic, the like the tank junkie that, or not tank junkie, but the military junkie that you see in.
Yes, she has like that knapsack with all the military stuff, and it's like, do you really pack that everywhere? It's like, yeah, just in case I need to go camping.
Right, exactly. So it's a very interesting story that, maybe why it's caught on to a lot of Japanese audiences, because it's very opposite to the demilitarization that happened with Japan after World War II. This is kind of
Mhm.
pro-military in a very interesting way. So I'm assuming in future episodes we're going to see the girls again go against other Japanese schools, and then go against schools from other countries as well, and like kind of that's going to be like the upward trajectory of the tournament arc. But the other thing that I thought very interesting was that the music being used. I don't know if you really caught on to the sound, but
Yes, bro, all of the fanfare. It's very in your face. Like as you said, like it's very, very pro-military, because you have the fanfare, even the propaganda that the president had shown everybody. It's like how Tankery shows you that you're tough, that you're feminine, and that you'll be a good wife. And it's like, what? That's what all driving a tank means? And it's just they were just like laying it on hard, just say, as you said, like just being very pro military. And it was very funny seeing that side of things.
Right, because like it's such a weird direction to take with one, like Japanese audiences, and two, and also with young girls, like kind of promoting that military agenda, because tying it into their social credits, I guess, or social standing as well. Because
no,
talking
it's
about the music,
their school credits,
yeah, school credits,
but
yeah.
The music.
But yeah, about the music is that a lot of it is just orchestral or instrumental with military marches. You're like, where do I know this from? Kind of vibe, because you don't really hear military marches in like your normal everyday life, I guess. And being an American, you're like, oh yeah, I know how bugle rebellies sound, but it was like it made me like want to look up the soundtrack, the OST for it, and like, oh, where is this from, and what is the history behind certain of marches, because it's used very sparingly, just as like background sounds. It's not really blaring in your face, so it's like a very subtle use of music here. But other than that, so like going through my checklist in my head, so sound design, characters, the story, and the animation, I guess we can talk last, is that because it's by a studio that doesn't do much, it seemed very appropriate for 2010, but also the CGI for the tanks was also 2010 CGI. So for the limited, exposure we had to the movement of the tanks, Sam, did it bother you enough to take you out, or how did you feel about it?
The first scenes with the tanks, where it was the media res that we had in the beginning, where they are in the middle of the first exercise, or the first, I forgot what it's called, when you go up against a team. It's sort of like a practice match. It's not a real match, but it's can be treated like a real match, but it's for practice. I forgot what that's called. Scrimmage. It's like the first scrimmage match that they have against the other school. The tanks, or at least the tanks alongside the drawn characters, felt a little mishmashed. It was cool what they were doing, because you get a scene where you see where we have like this first person view of Miho's position, where they're rolling out, and they're you're looking at all the other tankers and the people in their tanks at sort of like this 360 view as they're going forward. So like I said, that sort of immersive feel, I can see the shot that they were going for in 2010. That probably was really good back then, and kudos for them on that cinematography. But it's just like mainly the CGI on the tanks in that scene was not very good, even though like it's supposed to be like that shocking draw you in scene, right? At least like right now. All the other subsequent scenes with the tanks, I don't know if it's because of like how jarring that first scene was, but it was more, I was able to accept it a little bit more. I don't know if it's because I got used to it, or if because it was jarring. Now, was that did you have a similar experience too, Jay, or was yours different?
Well, I noticed something like very particular, that a lot of the movements with the CGI was actually replicating how tanks move in real life. Again, a lot of it's modeling. They're using, or at least in their third episode, they get to use the German Panzer, or the German Panzer IV, which, like, again, you don't have to be a military buff about anything, but it's like the telltale German tank, essentially. The single barrel, and like the, not crop top, I forgot how you have the opening at the top, but have you ever seen the movie Fury, which had, I think, Brad Pitt and what's a lot well, the other Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield.
Oh, Andrew Garfield, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of other like high priority or high profile actors in that. But anyways, yeah, it's just like the telltale German tank. But yeah, it's like all the in the scrimmage, all the girls go after our main MCs, and like again, it's like such a weird thing of these girls are just learning tanking for the first time. It's like there's no giant time skip, like you mentioned, like they clean up the tank and then you're just right at it, and like no lessons. And Miho is like competent in her job, like shows that she has, the qualities of a genius in the field as well as a natural born leader.
Mhm.
So it's nice on that. And then there's the tank fanatic that has like all the background for exposition sakes. If they need to drop that. But yeah, all the three other girls are just like doing it because they like, oh, this is kind of fun, kind of club activities, which is again part of the whole appeal of the moe genre. So yeah, it does lean far enough away from the cute girls doing cute things because one of the girls, I forget who, gets knocked out, but she gets knocked out.
Oh no, it was Hana. It was Hana, and that was the same. That was the same one I was going to bring up because, her name's Hana, and her family works in flower arrangement. Pun, but one thing that was cool, like, or at least like funny, was like she seems like that cool sort of reserved personality, right? Like that sort of uh, uh stoic in a female light. But when they shoot the cannon for the first time, or it's like the turret, the main gun of the tank for the first time, she's the one that her eyes sort of glow up like you would see in One Piece, like whenever there's a mecha on the scene, like she starts getting enthralled. And as they're choosing positions, Hannah's like, "Give me the gun, please. I like it when things go boom." And it was sort of just like, we did not expect that for you. But that it was sort of, like as you said, like having the girls being sort of exploring things that they didn't really realize that they had liked, and it was kind of cool seeing them sort of grow in their character a little bit like that.
Right, and that does seem to be the focus of the 3 episodes, at least. Not to do so much shop talk about the realistic complications that goes along with tanketry, like not focusing on the girls versus focusing on the subject matter, I guess, which is again kind of the point of this slice of life adjacent, that it's comfortable enough. It's not like supposed to be too educational, because like we could have talked about A Channel that came out this year. We talked about Yoru Yori by mistake earlier this year, as well as originally in 2010 was Lucky Star and K-On, so like kind of started the moe trend. And I was like, this is a nice break from the so focused cute girls doing cute things genre, and it was like skews far enough away that Sound of the Sky was more in that moe style, but this is still kind of ridiculous because they're still in their schoolgirl skirt uniforms. They're not really in military wear whenever they're like doing duties, because something completely skipped over is that their school is on a aircraft carrier.
Oh my goodness. Yes. It's like every school is on an aircraft carrier, and it's just like how big these are. It's crazy because the schools that Miho and the gang they're on, like it's shown to be huge. And then and apparently like for them to have scrimmage, they have to do it on actual land. They can't do it on the ships. I guess it's because they use actual ammunition. When they reach landfall, like they have to scrimmage with, again, like they scrimmage with another school, and then you see their ship pull up, and it's like what, twice, 3 times as big as their own air carrier ship. It's huge.
Right. So there's like this weird, it's very weird world that this series is taking place in. But yeah, it's like every school, like we always talk about how powerful the student council is, and like a lot of animes would go to the extreme, like saying, yeah, a student council of a school can override government laws and decisions. But yeah, and this schools are literally military powers. But with this one school, like it's still club activities, but it's like, yeah, it's so important to our civilization and our culture, and they touch on it lightly, like you said, with the propaganda from the president and like small things like that. But I guess last, before we go into our final decisions of past the 3-episode test and the Resurrect or Reburied, Sam, did you watch the sub or the dub? Because I was actually curious. This series has a renowned, terribly voice acted dub.
Oh, I watched the dub. I didn't have time to read. I had so I had to put it on the dub. What about you? I'm assuming you were a subber.
Yeah, I watched the sub because it's kind of one of those renowned series that had terrible localization for the English voice cast. So I was wondering if that impacted your viewing pleasure at all.
I would say one thing that was a bit jarring to me And I think it probably has to do a little bit with the story. When we see Miho when she wakes up for the first time, and she's undressing, and it looks like she's waiting for something to happen to her, right? As she's undressing, and then she opens her eyes, and she's like, and she says literally, "Is like, oh, I'm not home." And it made me think that there was maybe like a translation issue. So I hopped over to the sub real quick around that same time frame, and she said the same thing. It's like, "Oh, I'm not home," and so it made me think that like stuff was happening at her home where it was probably borderline, if not borderline, but like she was probably being abused when she was at home, on like, when she has to wake up, or like she has to, like something is done to her, like some form of hazing ritual or anything else like that, just because of the home that she grew up in. But as far as the dub goes, it wasn't too distracting. I would say maybe, what's her name? The girl, Saori, the one that was talking about the boyfriends all the time. That might have gotten a little bit annoying, because it was just like everything that she said is like, "Oh, beef stew is a way to a man's heart," something like that. Where I guess it's sort of like the girl's supposed to act like she knows everything when she really doesn't. So she's sort of overcompensating that way. That got a little annoying, but it's not necessarily a voice actor issue. It's more of like how a character is written.
Got you. Yeah, because I was thinking about again, like the reports of it is just that the English voice cast don't sound like young girls. Again, that's something that can be accredited to just.
No, as you said, like if anything, they sound like high schoolers. Because I think with these girls, are they in middle school or are they in high school?
Yeah, again, how the Japanese education system works, it would be like the transition for like the English system or the American system from middle school to high school. So around the
Mm-hmm.
age of 12 to 13.
Oh yeah, no, they don't sound 12 or 13. They sound older.
Yeah, exactly. So again, like part of the moe aesthetic is the cute girl moe kawaii voice, and I think that was more of the complaint. It's like, yeah, you can't really imagine girls of this kind of level of participation in military work without separation of their moe voice. So it's like it doesn't
Yeah.
work in that kind of way. So yeah, it's just one of those things I wanted to or bring attention to. But yeah, for our 3 episode test, I'm going to say that it passed because at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the 3rd episode, they have their team together. Miho gets positioned or appointed position as field commander. So again, like the schools have multiple tanks essentially, and then multiple teams, and again, projecting what a tournament is going to be is going to be like a battalion versus a battalion, not individual tanks, and that already has some potentially troubling elements where you're going to lose like the focus on each of the tanks crews, and it's just going to be like over sterilized or over archetypal characters, and won't be a lot very much deep, profound characterization from the other characters. But we'll see. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
3 episode test. I think it passed. How about you?
I'd say it passed because it gives you enough. It gives you enough mystery boxes to go off of. As I said, Miho's past, how she wants to get away from tankery. We don't necessarily know how her home life was, and we don't know what the incident was. We get a flashback. It seems like she might have gotten her tank in a situation where they were drowning, something like that. So they might touch on that a little bit, real world aspect later, a little bit later on. But as I said, like they give enough stuff for us to keep going, and they set up the world pretty good. So I'd say it passed for me as well.
All right, wonderful. So a separate question we ask is it resurrection or reburied, meaning that we bring it back, and that's suggested with all the other animes we're watching. Will we continue on past episode 3? Or is it reburied, meaning that it'll stay in the past and like, let's move on to the next anime? But for me, I'm definitely not on the fence. And now considering how I
Hmm.
grade it so highly, Sound of the Sky, I definitely prefer this version of the cute girls doing cute
Really?
things than how I liked how Sound of the Sky had a sci-fi kind of twist to it to kind of make it cute girls doing cute things, but sci-fi mystery. for this having somewhat of a more cultural and social kind of real world implication to a change of mentality towards warfare, I guess, or towards military life for Japanese people, I'm going to say it's real enough that I would say it's worth resurrecting. But how about you?
I'd say it's worth resurrecting as well, mainly because what you said before, we get cute girls doing other things in a cute way, and it sort of celebrates women exploring different things. As I said before, we had Hana who worked in floral arrangements, and she found inspiration in Tankery. And I would say also because of the strong network that Miho has in her school, we see how supportive her friends are, and it's in a healthy way. It's not in a manipulative way that we would see in other works where a lot of girls are really chatty, sometimes can be backstabby or not genuine. And in this in this anime, we have, you know, again, just like wholesome friends. Like everybody wanted to go into Tankery, but then when they realized that she didn't want to go into Tankery, they backed her up, and they had even went to the president, and they were chewing her out. It's like, yo, she doesn't want to do Tankery. Don't try to force her into doing Tankery. And even though the school president was threatening expulsion, they held their ground. So, you know, the fact that you have such a strong emotional connection out the gate, you feel like that throughout the rest of the series, that their ties are just going to get stronger. And no, it's going to be very well done. So, yeah, that's why I am going to be resurrecting the series.
Yeah, I kind of glossed over that first episode with that emotional kind of high point of building friends off of interest, but also it's like backing your friends when they say no to something. And that's very, like you said, wholesome and heartwarming, is that not only you form friends, but also they're going to stand up for you when you say no to being pressured into doing something. And she's a friend back saying like, yes, I can manage my trauma or my past because one, I don't want to be expelled, and again, exposure in high school animes is like death essentially. And then there's like the top that it's basically probably just going to be another 9 episodes of a tournament arc from any typical shonen, and as well as grounded inside of maybe some real world shop talk eventually down the line, hopefully, like with more exposure about the different kind of tanks and the armaments, and it's like going into the tactics of tank warfare on a battlefield, and probably get a little bit, touched upon, but not too intensely. But yeah. But for right now, Girls und Panzer, or G-Up, is a resurrect and a pass from both of us. Awesome.
That is great. G-Up has gotten a unanimous decision that cute girls can do cute things in tanks. That's amazing. Oh my goodness, I did not think that I would just like sit here and be talking about cute girls in tanks and saying that it's actually pretty good. I don't want to be too quick to say like maybe I'll give Girls Last Tour a try, but I feel like I don't know. I might have to get a little bit more time before I try that, because it seems like that's going to have like a depressing outlook or a depressing lens to it all. But yeah, like Jay said, that was our take on G-Up, otherwise known as Girls und Panzer. Resurrection from both of us, and it passed the 3-episode test from us. So go ahead, check it out. Let us know what you think about it. If we were right, if we were wrong, if we were a load of bunk, or if we know what we're talking about. And listen along with us next time as we continue with our voice actor spotlight on the voice actor Yuki Kaiji as we review yet another anime about children and their psychology in Shin Sekaiori, otherwise known as From Another World. Now, Jay, what have you got for us today?
All right. As it has some military theme, I thought it would best to either share some marches or some of the early American music from the 1940s, like Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy from the Andrews Sisters. But I was like, I'm not going to sing. I kind of sang last time when I talked about Aladdin from Disney and doing that original opening, but I just thought I would close with a very famous quote from one of my favorite anime characters from the Hellsing Ultimate Abridged series. Mr. Alucard says,
"Give that bitch a cannon. Bitches love cannon."